I was doing a version of this talk in Zurich a couple of weeks ago, and the Swiss were so happy with everything because they got started 5 minutes early. And
Hello,
so,
and
oops, stop that, there we go. And so I asked AI to create a little thing and said, make a little thing to celebrate the fact that we're starting 5 minutes early. And this is what the AI gave me. So we all know that AI can't count time very well, but it's learning to do other things, and that's actually a little bit more fun. So what we're going to talk about briefly here are what people sometimes refer to as AI winters, and I believe firmly we're about to hit our third AI winter on this, but that's not good or bad. What it really means is that you all are studying a subject here that is really unknown by most of the rest of the world's population, and particularly people in IT, because we don't require people to do this. Manoj said this was even an elective for you guys. But anyway, we're going to start out with some AI winters, and we're going to talk about governance and data governance in particular, what does work, what needs to work in there. And I'll give you guys a toolkit to be able to start to do things. And when I say a toolkit, as IT professionals, you hopefully have a big bag mentally, and you can reach inside and pull different tools out to see what's going to work where. And that should generate a series of questions in there, but we're going to talk specifically about data governance program successes here. And looking at these areas, and you see I've listed them up there, these key elements of program success. None of these are going to give you the answer, but they'll hopefully give you the tools so that when you encounter these situations in the real world, if you're not already, will at least be better equipped to take a look at them. So I'm going to start out with a first story here from a good friend of mine who worked for the MITRE Corporation. And he likes to call this story "An Executive Walks into an Elevator." And what he was doing, he said when he was younger, this is Michael, by the way, in the upper right-hand corner, he's been trying to get an appointment with somebody in this organization. MITRE's a big federal government consulting organization, for those of you that don't know. It's just like if we were down in Queensland, is that where your capital is? Gosh, I forget, Manoj. I've been there and I know where that goes. But anyway, he's trying to get an executive to validate something on a diagram that he has. And he keeps bothering this executive and says, hey, I need you to look at this and tell me whether it's correct or not. And the question that he was trying to answer was, can a project have multiple department owners? So in other words, can two departments share a project? And that may or may not sound fairly fundamental, but it turns out to be. And the executive is going, I don't have time for you. Just leave me alone. You could talk to somebody technical here. Michael says it's not a technical issue, it's a policy issue. And the executive says, well, that doesn't matter. It's still data, and I don't do data. That's not for me on this. Michael, of course, being persistent, he tries several more times, gets the same result, but he eventually finds somebody out there who's the DBA, the database administrator, who implemented the package. And the DBA says, well, of course a project can have multiple department owners. The way I set it up in the database, it's project linked to department through an intersecting entity called a department project. So again, we have a many-to-many relationship here and an intersecting entity in the middle to handle the many-to-many relationship on that. And Michael says, thanks, that's the answer I needed. I'm done, I've got my work. So the next time Michael runs into the executive on the elevator, Michael saying nothing, the executive turns around and says, I thought you were going to bother me about that issue. And Michael says, no, the techies described how they implemented it. Projects have multiple department owners. And the executive goes, what? No, that's wrong. That's not corporate policy. And Michael says, well, it doesn't matter what your policy is. If the program allows it to do it, if the software allows it to do it, if the database design allows it to do it, then they're more important than you are, because you can spout policy all you want, but how the data is actually implemented is what makes the end result. And his motto at the end of this, which I've never forgotten, is that data is executed policy. It shows what has happened. So kind of my first encounter with this concept called data governance in here. Now, if you're familiar with the imitation game, you sort of know a little bit about how all this got started. We were trying to beat the Germans during World War II, back in the days when we used to fight instead of us against the other guys on here. But you can also see what happened here. And I like this particular definition. These are pictures of the researchers who went up to Dartmouth University to do this summer research project to try and simulate artificial intelligence, to try to simulate intelligence on here. And a good definition is the simulation of human processes by machines, enabling them to perform tasks that typically require cognitive functions in that. But the other thing that you'll see in all of these histories is that AI has gone through these winters. And as I said before, we're certainly going to hit one again, just the same way as we're certainly going to hit a recession. If you're older than 10 years old, we've gone through a recession. It's something periodically that happens, and it's something that seems to happen with AI. But in particular, I'm going to talk about the origin of the term winter for just a minute. Now, if you don't know who Augusta Ada King, she is often called Lady Ada, and there was a programming language that was named after her on this. And you may say to yourself, well, why do I care about this? Well, she looked at this weaving loom right here. It wasn't actually this one, it was a different one, but you see how weaving loom works, right? We pass the shuttle back and forth, we do different colors, and we can make different patterns on this, and it's all controlled by something. In this case, the weaving loom he was looking at was not this one, but this one, which is called a jacquard loom, and they were weaving very large braided natural fiber rugs that were coming out of this. And if this piece right here looks a lot like this piece, of which I keep one handy as well, these are the computer cards that Manoj and I started working on back in the old days. Yes, I can hear you laughing on that. She, however, looked at that situation, this is Lady Ada again, and said, oh, when my friend creates his differential engine, I will be able to program that machine to do mathematics. So in other words, she looked at this, making a rug, and said, I can turn down and make it do differential equations, which is what the piece I just popped up there for. That is the world's first computer program, and she is the world's first computer programmer. But in addition to being the world's first computer programmer, she also invented something called the hype cycle. This is what it looks like. There's a company called Gartner, which does all sorts of advising of people, and they claim they invented this, but she actually invented this. And you saw what happened here. We started off in one part, and at the bottom end of this thing, we start off with a technology trigger, and we've raised it to the peak of inflated expectations. And she says, in considering any new subject, there's frequently a tendency to first overrate what we find to be interesting and remarkable, and secondly, by a sort of natural reaction, to undervalue the true state of the case. And you saw what happened there. The thing went from the peak of expectations to the trough of disillusionment. And guess what? You guys get to figure out what it looks like as you work your way back up the slope of enlightenment towards the plateau of productivity. Now, this is her words. Gartner says they invented it, but you see what happens here. You see something new, it's really great. 2 weeks later, oh, it's really terrible. The answer is not it's really great or it's really terrible, but there's somewhere in the middle. And that's really what your job as IT professionals is going to be in order to look at this. So these are some of the Gartner hype cycles. You can see in 2023, they had generative AI at the peak of inflated expectations, meaning what should it have done next year? That's correct, roll over the edge, and there it is, falling off the edge and now headed for the trough of disillusionment. There's GenAI in 2024, and here it is in 2025. You can see it's falling fast. Now, none of this means it's going to be bad or good. This is just the general perception. And what we're looking for here is, at least in Gartner's perspective, a 2 to 5 year period before this starts to get back here to the plateau of productivity. So they estimate that this journey is going to take 2 to 5 years out here. Once again, it's going to be up to all of you all to actually do the work here. So they're just hypothesizing as to what your work is going to be. But this is what's going to cause that next AI winter. And you'll see it is absolutely going to happen here. So what's going on? And by the way, I'm using lots of GenAI in this. So when you see this thing flashing in the corner, you'll know it's a Gemini output here. They used to call it Bard back when it first was released, and then they decided Gemini was a better word for it. But you ask the question, what keeps causing these recurring AI winters? And the first answer is over-promising and under-delivering. The second one is technology limitations. The third one is a lack of data. And the fourth one, of course, is ethical concerns. So we're going to spend a little bit of time walking through these and then also looking at how, in this case, GenAI can be particularly helpful to those of you that might be involved in these types of generative AI activities. But if you're not, I'll give you enough background to understand what data governance is and how this can help, because it's a pattern. And once you see how this pattern works, you can apply it in almost every aspect of what your life is. At our university, they have given all students the professional version of either ChatGPT or Gemini, depending on which flavor they like to have on here. And we're encouraging everybody to do it. It's got our faculty terrified because everybody's going, oh my God, the students are going to use it to cheat. Well, everybody's going to use it to cheat. And if that's how you're going to get through your program, that's one thing. But there's actually some really good things that are going to come out of it. And that's what I hope to cover next few minutes. I contend, however, that all four of these causes are the responsibility of a data governance organization, because who in your organization is going to better know whether you are over-promising and under-delivering? Who is going to understand better the technology limitations? Who's going to understand the lack of data and how to find the right type of data to train your models? And who is going to be paying attention to these ethical concerns? Once again, I say that is you guys in order to do this, because Manoj and I are getting old and we're teachers. So again, over-promising and under-delivering, technology limitations, lack of data, and ethical concerns. But all four of these are the responsibility of data governance. So this is how data governance was taught. AI was taught when I was in my university program. We used a book by Roger Schank in here, and it was really focused on trying to put everything together. And just sort of, if I knew that the knee bone connects to the thigh bone and the thigh bone connects to the hip bone, then eventually we'll be able to walk and talk and jump around and run. Well, it's a long ways towards this. I was programming in Lisp and Prolog. And if you've ever tried to make a flow chart representing any sort of complicated process, you know it's not easy to specify these things. And my favorite example of this is a little short video that I'm going to show you here. But just imagine trying to make a flow chart that says the process of how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, this particular piece, this is a computer science professor who likes to torture his kids. So he's asked the kid here to write down what he needs to do to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And Dad, the computer science professor, is now going to try and follow those directions. Here we go.
Get 2 pieces of bread out. Got 'em. Get a butter knife and get some PB. Take 1 piece of bread, spread it around with the butter knife.
No, Dad, with the peanut butter.
I'm just doing what it says. It says take 1 piece of bread, spread it around with the butter knife. Take 1 piece of bread and take the butter knife that has the peanut butter on it and spread it all over the top of the piece of bread.
Dad,
that's the top.
I mean the sides.
Bread.
You're supposed to
take the butter knife with the peanut butter on it. Wipe it all over the piece of bread that's blank. Take the butter knife, rub the jelly all over the piece of bread.
Oh, he's doing better.
It says all over.
These kids are clearly going to need therapy when they get older from their wonderful father here. It's not an easy task. And the second piece is technology limitations that we have. We've gone from the traditional von Neumann architecture, and von Neumann was one of the people in that picture that I showed you a little while ago there. And now we've got fantastic chipsets that take care of the old kind of memory. We used to have different sets of memory in different ways. Now it's all just big and integrated. And I'm showing you a Macintosh chip, but the Intel chips are pretty good here as well. And yet, interestingly enough, AI companies are running out of training data. Now, how can that be? Because we're producing data at an increasing rate, and we're producing you guys, the people that know what to do with data, at a lesser rate than we're doing this. And yet we're running out of data. Here are 4 or 5 headlines. AI systems are running out of data. So what's actually happening here is that we estimate that since the peak of inflated expectations that I showed you a minute ago, there's about 15% less data out there on the internet to train people. And you may say to yourself, well, how can there be less data? That's clearly increasing and increasing and increasing. Well, there's a project out of the University of Chicago called Nightshade. And what is happening is that companies that don't want their data and asset to be used to train the AIs, they are poisoning their data. So if you have a picture or something that you're doing, you can actually add this poison to it. So if the AI eats it, the AI will then not produce the correct results. And also makes it really easy to sue them. I'm involved with one of the lawsuits on this because they snarfed up a couple of my books early on and didn't pay us for them. So, you know, that's a problem with AI. So poisoning data is one thing. Another thing that's a real problem is that CIOs are looking at very large costs. And I don't know if you guys saw Sam Altman's most recent comments on this. We're going to talk about it a little bit. But if you're saying polite things to your AI, like thank you AI and things like that, he says that costs more water bottles in the world. And you shouldn't be polite to your AI. Well, you know, we're still figuring this stuff out. But generally, if you're asking for something, I think it's a good idea to ask for it politely around there. Yet, nevertheless, a CIO killer, if you will, being able to do this. Or the number one problem around vendors today is the size of their cloud bill. And the fact that it's gotten to their CEOs is a really, really big problem. In order to use data, we'd like to have data that is what we call fit for use. And when we get fit for use data, that means we can actually start to be using it. Now, this is my own personal logo here that you guys are going to see. Bad data plus anything awesome is going to give you bad results. And that is going to be true no matter what. But I believe that so fervently that this is the car that I use to drive around here. And you can see the license plate is garbage in, garbage out. And that's a negative way to say it. Somebody corrected me. I was in Omaha this summer and they said, you shouldn't really be so negative and say garbage in, garbage out. So we'll call it goodness in, goodness out. But you can see it's constrained. If the data is bad, the AI can't be good, is what it really comes down to. And this gets us into a whole series of topics around ethics. Manoj, I don't know if you have your classes look at some of these things, but the Coded Bias movie in particular, every university in the country got a copy of that. And it's a wonderful, wonderful book. All of my students, the book is called Unmasking AI, the Coded Bias movie, about 85 minutes. Probably some of the most important 85 minutes that's on Netflix at the moment in order to look at that. Now, ethics, when we talk about it, is a subject that you don't want the first time you encounter it to be the time where you have a crisis. And here's a little piece that just sort of outlines a little bit around those areas. So this is something called the trolley problem. Hopefully you guys haven't been bored with it yet.
A runaway train is heading towards 5 workers on a railway line. There's no way of warning them, but you're standing near a lever that operates some points. Switch the points, and the train goes down a spur. Trouble is, there's another worker on that bit of track too, but it's 1 fatality instead of 5. Should you do that? Many people think the right thing to do would be to switch the points, to sacrifice 1 to save 5, since that produces the best outcome possible. Now imagine the train heading for the workers again. This time it can only be stopped by pushing a very large man off a bridge. His great bulk would stop the train, but he...
Again, a little bit problematic in terms of how that works out. Now, one of the things that happens in a typical ethics class is that you'd be divided up into groups. Some people would push the people over, some people wouldn't, some people would switch the points, some people wouldn't. There's no right answer to this question. But the point is, wouldn't it be nice if you worked for a company that said always push the guy off the bridge? At least you'd know what was going on and you could make a decision about whether you wanted to work for them or not. And this comes up, unfortunately, an awful lot in data governance. So here's an example. Do any of you have a Tesla down there? So this is a Tesla screen that you're looking at, and the Tesla is trying to figure out what's in front of it. And I'm going to show you about 20 seconds. So I want you to watch this area of the screen right here as the Tesla tries to figure out what's in front of it. Now notice it's got a pretty good screen. There's the car that's passing, so that's going up that direction. And this is a red car in front of a horse and buggy. And it's not a great picture, but it's a real video. So we just have to put up with it. So take a watch on the screen here as the Tesla tries to figure out what's going on. It's a horse and buggy. There's the car. Now it's a pickup truck, not a semi-truck. There's a person walking. There's a semi-truck. So we're, again, approaching the horse and buggy, and it thinks it's a semi-truck. Okay, that's pretty interesting. If it's a semi-truck, maybe we ought to take some, wait a minute, semi-truck this way, semi-truck that way. The pickup truck, oh, semi-truck heading right for us. What on earth is going on? And the final result of the Tesla's conclusion is that I'm approaching a semi-truck with a person traveling behind it on foot. Now, what had happened here, actually, of course, was that whoever created the software for the Tesla did not have a horse in front of it. And more importantly, the mindset of the people who did this never thought they might not be able to identify something. They might encounter something unknown or unexpected, but they don't code the category in there. Now, if you approach something that's unexpected or unknown, what should your Tesla do? It should immediately set itself into caution mode. Again, you saw that. It saw that the truck was headed right towards you, and yet that Tesla did not slow down or anything else, right? It just kind of looked and kept trying to do this. Our computer science professionals are not trained to be humble and understand there are things out there that they wouldn't know. And yet, as a data governance professional, you guys should say it's ethically not correct to give it only options of people, big trucks. We also should have a category of other. And if we go into a category of other, our vehicle that we're doing, the process that we're doing, should go into a caution mode. So these are really problematic aspects of what's happening out there. And this is why you guys are getting a course under this. So again, we'll look real quickly here at what does work, what needs to work in here. And this is a article that's become very famous. It literally just came out in August. The report is that 95% of generative AI pilots at companies are failing. Most people have never read the report. I actually got a copy of it, but what they did is they read these articles that were describing this. And I think they've come up with a pretty interesting description on this. What they're really looking at here is that there's a lack of return on investment, that if I invest X, I should get X plus in order to come back. If I don't, then I probably shouldn't do whatever it is I'm doing. That there are integration issues because the AI doesn't fit well within the existing defined business practices. That there's a verification task, which means that all of you all, as employees of this company that's implementing this thing, are now sitting down and trying to have to go manually through things to figure out whether the AI is correct or not. And again, they're not really focusing, the successful projects focus on what we call back office automation. So not interfacing with customers, which means no IVR. I don't know how well you guys like it, but I have a habit of yelling at the IVRs and not getting good results from them. By the way, I did ask the AI to give me a summary for this report. That's this little green blob in the corner there. It doesn't actually say anything, which is too bad, but it did its best. So we'll just do that. So what happens there? Well, workflow integration is correct. We have domain-specific tools that we use. We're focusing in on externally sourced AI systems. In other words, people who make AI are better at it than people who try to make AI. And as I said before, this back office focus is really important because what happens when you ask people to incorporate data, these are from a wonderful set of very good scientific surveys called the Data Literacy Project here. It's a joint effort between Click and Accenture. And they ask thousands of people around the world and are able to report definitively that when employees are faced with data, 50% of them will incorporate it, 52% will incorporate it, but 48% of them will make a guess based on what their gut feels like. And that's not the outcome that we want people to have. It gets worse when we go to the C-suite. 2/3 of them make that gut level decision. So these are wonderful organizations, but you can't just put better quality data in the hands of the employee. You also have to show them how to make use of it. Here's another set of findings from that particular study, which is that when faced with these things, 50%, as I said, would incorporate data, but 36% would find an alternate way of doing this, flipping a coin, getting a Ouija board. I don't know what they're trying to figure out how to do this. And 14% of them would ignore the task entirely. Well, that's not what we pay people to do. And it certainly is not a good way of running the railroad. There's another sort of dour piece on this as well, which is that we start out here and everybody agrees that some preparation of data is inevitable. I'm going to say it's 50% at this point, which means if I'm paying you all 6 figures in order to do the analysis work, and you have to spend 50% of your time preparing for analysis, then I'm really only getting about half of what I should get. If you know anything about the real numbers on here, we'd love people to be putting 80% of their time into it and 20% of their time preparing, but the actuality is that it's just the opposite. You talk to anybody who works in this field, they will tell you that they spend 80% of their time munging the data, trying to figure out what's going on and how it's going to work, doing data preparation, which means that your value as a data scientist is very differently calculated on that. Now, it's not quite time for lunch here, but I'm going to talk about one of my favorite things, which is a data sandwich. And that's the idea that you're doing this to create a certain high performance automation. There's no point in doing this stuff if you have to intervene manually. The only way you're going to make $1 billion is to make 1 billion transactions, right? So that means that we have varying levels of literacy, varying levels of supply, and varying levels of standards and data processes that are here. And trying to get all that to work together is kind of awkward. So even though we're doing PowerPoint here, we still want to smooth these things out and make them so that they will all fit together nicely. And for some reason, it's been really hard for companies to do this. But most importantly, you'll observe that you can't do this without investments in engineering and architecture. And I had to go all the way to India to find this little sign that I have here: quality engineering and architecture work products do not happen accidentally. And I saw that sign on a tea farm in India over the cash register. And I was like, wow, that's great. And you know what? It's true about data things as well. You can't have quality data engineering and architecture work products. They just don't happen accidentally. They have to happen intentionally. And what are we going to do to get this to work? Well, you saw that the subtitle of my talk is a CRUD matrix. So this is essentially what you need to have in order to get AI to work well for you. You need a context model that comes from one of your analysis and design classes that will help you to describe a process architecture and a data architecture, comprised, of course, of process models and data models that are in there. And that gives us this thing called a CRUD matrix. And we also include a controlled vocabulary, because if we're not all speaking the same language, it's going to be very problematic. And a CRUD matrix tells us that we're going to understand how each of these processes work. For example, if I take data item number 1, we can see that process A creates it and process B reads it. Well, I can't have process B read something that hasn't been created. So clearly there's a dependency that's shown between there. And you can go through and add all of the various bits and pieces together in order to come up with all of these pieces. But if you have all of this information, you're now prepared to start working on a good AI type problem. Minimum viable requirements that are here. You're going to have tools that work on back office type things. You're going to have to get the AI to work at scale, fix existing workflows, complement your existing architectures, and as I said, use that controlled vocabulary to communicate with everybody around it. And for the AI to work, it's got to have data that's fit for purpose and a supporting infrastructure that's going to get this. But the most important thing that it doesn't have in most cases, and once again, this is going to fall to you all to be the ones to fix this, is that you need auditability. When the AI says something, you want to understand why it says something. It didn't recognize the car. The Tesla didn't recognize the car in front of it because it didn't have any explainability. It couldn't say, I can't figure this out. You saw that it couldn't do that, but it actually didn't. So a little toolkit in here, and this is a slide that Manoj and I have actually used for years. Big data's where everybody talks about it, but nobody really knows what to do, but they think everybody else is doing it, so everybody claims they're doing it. And you saw these signs an awful lot over the place. This next little 2 minutes is the most valuable piece of AI advice I've gotten personally over the last year on this. This is a data scientist named Hannah Fry, and I'm just going to let her explain why you should be polite to AI, but not to try and get you guys to be polite. More importantly, listen to how you should use the AI.
There is actually a really good reason why you should say please and thank you to your chatbots. And it's not just so that AI will spare you when the apocalypse comes. Okay, I'm sure you've seen all sorts of posts telling you what prompt to use to get the most out of your language model. I think you can pretty much forget all of that, because there's only really one important thing to remember, which is that the AI that we have now is really, really, really good at role playing. So you shouldn't talk to it like it's a Google search or like you're trying to extract information from it as though it's Wikipedia. Instead, you should talk to it as though it's an improvisational actor that can be any character imaginable. And the reason for this is that large language models, they don't store facts like it's a database, right? They generate responses dynamically based on having read everything that humans have ever written and the prompt that you give it. And that means that AI, the stuff we have now, it doesn't have this stable identity, right? It doesn't have a fixed worldview, it doesn't have personal beliefs. And so if you prompt it in a particular way, it will respond in kind. If you try and prompt it as though it's a Shakespearean bard, then it will give you a flowery response. If you try and prompt it as though it is an extremely effective and smart scientist, it will give you the relevant response. But if you prompt it as though it's an encyclopedia, it's going to try and sound like one, but it's still just performing a role, and you've effectively just restricted what it can do. So instead, what you should do is you should imagine that you're a film director, right? And that you have a character in mind, and then you should prompt your AI accordingly. So don't say, give me 3 interesting facts about science. Say, you are a world-renowned scientist with PhDs in biology and chemistry and physics, and your nephew says that science is boring. You only have a few minutes and you've got to give him counterexamples. What extraordinary stories do you use? And here is the big idea, right? If you are working with a character and you want that character to eagerly help you, whoever they are, it's probably better to be polite.
Again, she's bearing the lead there. The key is to understand that you should really give it a good prompt. So here's a prompt that I helped Gemini to create for using these responses that I'm giving you in the rest of this talk that we have here. You're a seasoned data governance professional who's helped dozens of organizations gain value from their data governance efforts. You're able to translate complex topics into language and images with executives with a short attention span and willingly follow. Please describe, and again, that's where I'd get it into there. So that's a little bit of context. As you get better at these, you will start to store these prompts in a library, in a notebook somewhere, so that you can come back and reuse them. Really important to do. So that's the first piece, is to treat your AI like it's an improvisational actor. As I mentioned before, VCU buys these for everybody. I'm going to be using Google here, but none of this is impossible to do with all the rest of it. So again, Gemini, great stuff. Maybe you've noticed also an adjunct product with Gemini called Notebook LM. And for some reason, they need weird, strange people to do this. But I'm going to give you an example of how this works. At VCU, where Manoj and I were both on faculty here, I'm supposed to be responsible for 162 policies. Now, I've been here at VCU for 33 years, and I can assure you I've sat down and read through all of these policies and memorized them, and I can, never looked at most of them, of course. But if I take them and feed them into an LLM, in this case with a line drawn around it, that's what Notebook LM is. It gives you the ability to do some very interesting things. For example, there are all the policies on the left-hand side, and I can now ask questions about this. And I can say, if a student needs an exception for something, what are the policies that come to play? And it does a great job of doing this. But it does one thing also in addition to this. See this button down here called Audio
of
Overview?
tech use on campus. Because trust me, there are some very interesting details.
Definitely some hidden gems
in these documents that, frankly, need to know.
You're going to want to know about.
Yes.
So what it's done is it's made a little 20-minute podcast describing all of the policies at VCU. Well, when I say it gives us another channel, it's really important because we know that people learn by doing, by watching, and by reading. And if we communicate only with PowerPoints, they're only going to get it one way. But if you give them information like this, you can take a very large document and have just one piece of this, click the audio overview button, and it will give a little piece. Some people learn better by listening. So you'll now be able to reach more of your audience in order to do this. And it sounds like a very clever little podcast. In fact, it is. It's a really neat little piece. It's a great way to do it. It's much more engaging than just reading it. I do this all the time when I have something that's important to do, but the dog wants to be walked. Right? I will turn around, push the button, make a little podcast, put it in my ear, and go for a walk with the dog. And I can still continue to be productive, learning out how all of these things work. When we talk about data governance, there's a lot that most organizations focus on getting started with it. And I really don't think that's quite the way you should do it, because that process only occurs once. Instead, what you'll have is a repeating process on the other side, which is to say that we're going to take the data of this organization and we're going to try to use it to achieve the organizational strategy in a way that's better than we started out in order to do this. So you can see, if I have my choice, I want to put efforts into the right-hand side of this diagram instead of on the getting started part. And this process on the right-hand side, the older I've gotten, the more all methodologies, that word doesn't actually mean what most people think it means, but again, they talk about it as a fancy word. I say methods in here, and they look like plan, do, check, act, which, if you know anything about quality, is what we call a Deming quality circle around all this. So you've got here now the ability to take a bunch of things and throw them onto these tools that are available. Most of them are available completely for free in order to do this. But again, urge you guys to play with it. And here's how I've applied it in this particular instance. So again, we're going to drop through each of these pieces. The first question in data governance is, how are we going to govern all of this data? Because everybody does have a lot of it. And I say that's the wrong question, because the right question should be, are we going to include this particular data item within the scope of our data governance efforts? If we don't, then we don't have to mess with it. Regardless of what the decision is, document it so that we definitely don't have to come back and revisit this decision time after time after time. Again, it's one of the things that we're old and we've done a lot of these things before. We get a lot of it. So here are, again, I said, make me a graphic for this. It didn't do that very well, so we don't have a good piece there. But we do have at least some things that we say should happen. And you can see I'm just going to put them all up here, along with the little cute icons that it puts it up. Clear responsibilities, comprehensive policies, centralized metadata management, robust data quality, strong data security, effective data steward, good data-driven culture, and continuous improvement and adaptability. So those are the characteristics, if you will, of a successful data governance program on this. So again, first piece in here, and I'm just going to put these up because there's way too much on here and I'm not going to go through all of it. But what I said was, what are we going to do in order to finally understand who the ownership, the mapping, how all this stuff works together? Auto suggest data stewards, usage and access monitoring on the part of the AI, and policy to role mapping. You can feed these things into something like an LLM and it will start to produce outputs on this. For example, here are some definitions of data governance. I don't like any of these definitions. If you can imagine getting on an elevator with somebody and saying, let's talk about decision rights, right? The boss is just going to say, no, I don't want to talk about that. Again, if you get on an elevator, you've got a little bit amount of time to actually make yourself known to the executive. And in this particular instance, I got on the elevator with one of the students at a business. The boss jumped on the elevator and the boss said to the student, how's that project going? The data scientist said, well, we're up to 72%. And the boss exploded, head on fire, boom, eyes bugging out. We don't do anything at this organization less than 100%. So get out of my site and don't come back. Again, just a complete miscommunication here. But here was the interesting part. When I did go in to try and clean up the mess, we found out that actually at 65%, there was $5 million of revenue on the table for 3 years. That's something that the data scientist really was not understanding. They didn't have that context in here. So the exploding boss was actually correct for the wrong reasons. So what do I define data governance as? Managing data with guidance, or if I'm talking to executives, I actually change it slightly and say it's managing data decisions with guidance, trying to get the whole team on focus to help use data better in support of the mission. And there's a number of different pieces that come into play. Most people define data governance using these kinds of numbers here. Again, leadership, stewards, other people, and they draw a line around the left-hand side and make these guys the data governance piece. And these guys are responsible for getting resources and getting some feedback, which means they make decisions to the stewards. The stewards are then told to go off and change some things that are happening in the organization. They make some changes and again, get some feedback on it. And you can see here again, this is the plan, do, check, act type of scenario that falls into here. When you look at all of these things, that's a great way to do it. And the actual system will go through and help you to sort these things out. The more you read into the LLMs, the smarter they are. So second part of this, policy interpretation. You can have the AI read your policy and then give it scenarios and say, would these things work within these scenarios? It's a good idea to try and exercise it. Again, automating the compliance monitoring, proactively looking at data quality and saying, you know, we probably don't have any 200-year-old customers here at this particular organization. Dynamically generating the standards by doing machine learning and reading across all of your data. And again, shifting this data governance from a policing sort of activity to a partnering type of activity. Manoj knows that I'm very much of a horse lover. And again, I just asked the AI, write me a data governance charter for a nonprofit that rescues horses. And by golly, it did a great job of doing that in the first place. Turns out some of this stuff the AI is actually pretty smart about. So that was an unscripted request. Again, you saw the prompt I used, but it is able to give us really good, useful stuff. Is it perfect? No. Might we want to tweak some words? Yes, but it did a lot of work for us really, really fast. Here's another thing it does. It can actually understand when you're doing these things and saying, well, who should do what? And it will put together what's called a responsibility assignment matrix or a RACI chart, RACI, that shows up in there. Again, centralized metadata management. What's going on? Well, we need to make sure that we have the ability to do these things fast. We need to be able to assess risks associating with each one of these. And we need to make sure that people who are supposed to access this stuff can, in fact, access this. One of the things I like to do is to consider metadata not as a noun, but in fact, as a gerund. And that means metadata represents a use of data, not a type of data. It really becomes a lot easier when you look at it that perspective in there. Although I did have an argument with my Gemini, because Gemini thinks I'm wrong. It says why metadata is not a gerund. Well, the AI is not always right, or we're still in charge. That may change, but we're still in charge. How do we do data quality management for this? Well, again, a lot of different features. It can detect anomalies. It can self-learn rules come to you. Again, if you recall the very first example there with Michael and the person in the elevator, if he'd actually looked at the data, he would have been able to find out from the data exactly what was going on in there. You can do what's called intelligent cleansing, which is a little bit more sophisticated than just sort of the brute force type things, meaning that you can shift from a reactive to a proactive stance in your data governance. And that's critically important because it turns out it's not easy to visualize the cost of data debt. It decreases your quality, it increases your costs, it presents greater risks, and 80% of organizational data is redundant, obsolete, or trivial. And that's a huge amount of data, which means that your problems are a different size than most people think about them in there. How do we set up strong security around these things? Well, again, find that sensitive data. We can have the AI go look for it much more effectively than we can write rules for it. We can enforce the access rules. We can stay compliant within GDPR or HIPAA or whatever else comes down there. And we can protect the data while it's in use as you go through. So again, these are all reference. You guys have them. You can look them over at your own idea. But let me just give you one example of this in a data security context. If I'm looking in an organization at their security posture, there are certainly some people that are monitoring the digital environment, but there also are people who are monitoring the physical environment. And this particular organization happened in a real-time situation. There was a yellow Volkswagen that was parked opposite the building that they were in, and the guards at the physical security place would write it down and say yellow Volkswagen. Great. They weren't interfacing with the people who were getting the attacks, where things were pinging on this and not able to do this. Well, again, the AI can cross these domains and put together a better type of log monitoring type situation on this. If we look at stewardship and get a sort of data stewardship context in here, most of the pieces that go into this here, again, discovery and classification, policy enforcement, quality and remediation, and documentation. Everybody hates to do documentation, and AI is really, really good at it. We actually know what, for example, we want a data steward to be. Here's a set of skills that come up from one of our federal agencies. I won't go through each of these with you, but once you have this understanding, you can now start to look at the types of people that you need to have in here, because data, of course, goes crazy in terms of what's going on there. One data problem can show up as multiple different types of problems, but you don't see that because it's always filtered through some sort of IT system or business process. And so when you look at this, until you guys get down there and connect all the dots, you won't realize that all of these problems are connected by one thing at the center. And if we don't have that one thing set up correctly to do, it's better to do it as a team. It's better to have a group of people that understand this and that are focused on this, rather than trying to make it 10% of everybody's job, in which case nothing will actually get done. Because of course, as I said, you've got this really reconceptualization of the organization as a data machine. Everything that comes into the organization is data. Everything that pops out of it is going to be data. And so we'll start to understand this. We would do most of this, and if we could do all of it, we would manage it very, very tightly, but that's too expensive and requires a slow bureaucracy on this. But if I do too little of it, I'm going to miss opportunities. So where is that balancing point? And once again, that's where you all are going to be able to do this, looking particularly for interoperability as a primary determinant of value in there. And yet, when we look at this, we also want our data stewards to take some of the data and become more known. So I'm now showing about 20% of the data is known and 80% of it is unknown. And over time, we want to continue to decrease both the size of the unknown pile and the overall size of the data pile here as well, so that we're able to better use our data in support of organizational strategy. Trying to get to a culture on this. Again, core different areas. What happens here? Well, efficiency and coverage, risk and compliance, cultural adoption. And here again, I'm giving you all of this stuff that you can take a look at, but here's the real key for this. Again, a different set of surveys here, but this is by colleagues Randy Bean and Tom Davenport, who you may have read some of their books. And the link here is live, so when you get the slides, you can just click on it and go straight to the data. But we asked the question, what of the thousands of companies they're looking at around the world, are you driving innovation with data? And in 2023, for the first time, we had more than half the companies saying that they were driving innovation with data. 41% said they were competing on analytics. 40% said they were managing data as a business asset. 24% creating a data-driven organization, and 1 in 5 creating a data-driven culture. Not terribly exciting there, right? That's sort of good. Well, let's look at 2024 data. Of course, it makes it a little bit higher. We get some slightly higher numbers. I was very skeptical. I literally watch these numbers as they come out every January. And I said, this is not going to hold up. And sure enough, when we went to the 2025 numbers, if you look here, we had some taking some steps back on all of this. So we're still not with everybody getting everything, but we've got a lot. This was the most important piece that came out of the surveys, though. For years and years, Randy and Tom asked the same question to these thousands of companies. Are your problems with data primarily technology oriented, or are they more people and process oriented? And the answer in 2018 was 20% were technology and 80% were people and process. 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. Do you get the picture? The problems in data are largely people and process problems. And what other group in the organization is going to be addressing people and process problems with data other than your data governance organizations? Now, we're not home yet. One of the things I've been working on, trying to figure out this thing called data culture. And when I look at what's happening, most people are doing data culture from sort of the inside out. I went to the people who do culture. And this is a really interesting thing. There's a very famous professor named Hofstadter who said, look, these are the things that make up culture. And we're now trying to map these onto some constraints that have to do with technology. So Manoj, maybe this is a paper for us to work on at some point, trying to bridge that particular divide that goes there. Finally, with all of these things, continuous improvement. You need to have it, because none of this stuff is going to be helpful unless we can have a way of quickly and easily making changes. So real-time discovery, policy stress testing, automated verification, just some of the many, many things that come up here. So as I said, when we started out, this occurs once. What you really want to get good at is the second side, where you're doing this plan, do, check, act type of thing over and over and over again, and getting better at the overall process. Using generative AI is a great way to help you with this, and it will give you a lot of really good ideas. here again, clear roles and implementations, comprehensive policy, centralized metadata, robust data quality management, et cetera, all the way on down. Again, what was causing these things? Well, overpromising and under-delivering, technology limitations, lack of data and ethical concerns. And you know what? Most of this has not changed, but all of these are responsible for data governance. Now, I think when I sent you the link on this thing, I sent you some additional pieces that come on here. So you have some backup materials with all of this. But at this point, Manoj, I'll stop and see if you guys have any particular questions.
Thank you very much, Peter. I'm going to open to the class to ask questions.
Now I can see you guys since I'm not presenting. All right, there's the other Peter.
And there's the other Fry.
Yep. Famous name there, Daniel.
Questions from the class.
Peter has a question up, right?
Yeah. Oh,
please.
Peter.
Firstly, a big kudos to you, Pete, for being up at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday morning over there. I don't know how you're going to go to work, so I appreciate your time. I really do.
You know, us professors, we don't actually work, Peter.
That's not true. My question is related to, in your presentation, you spoke about how it's people and processes, and that's where it's all, where the rubber hits the road. In your experience, I don't know if you've been in enterprise or you're mostly in academic world, but what actual methodologies or implementation strategies work the best to create that culture within people that benefits the use of data management in a positive way? Because you've spoken about the importance of it, but can you give it like concrete examples of where you implemented this sort of training strategy or thought process with people and it created a successful result that was measurable? Like, I just thought I'd ask that question.
So one of the fun things about my own particular career trajectory is that Manoj would look at my office some days and I would not be there for months on end. So I've actually gone and lived with these corporations for a long time. I spent 4 years in Finland with Nokia as they were selling themselves to Microsoft. That was fun stuff in there. And so I have a lot of that experience in there. And I've spent 3 years with Walmart, for example, as they were doing things. And I actually got doged out of the federal government this spring as part of the, madness that we have going on over here in this country right at the moment. But the question is, how does this work? And it really, what we talk about in terms of data governance is that there's no way we on the outside can prescribe anything for a company on the inside. You've got to get inside the company and figure out how it works and then figure out what the levers are inside the organization. So I call it like making a bespoke suit. You guys are closer to Hong Kong than we are, so you know what tailored suits are, right? And you want a suit that fits you really, really well. Well, data governance has to be the same thing. Each organization has its own different characteristics and its own types of problems. I've been to some organizations where they're working with some things that are really important to some companies that are just completely irrelevant for other companies. So it's really a matter of going in and listening, finding out what's in there, doing what you can to get additional information in here. Again, think of the GenAI as a companion, somebody who sits on your shoulder and whispers in your ear, if you will, or something like that. But in terms of saying, oh my gosh, there's, these types of organizations and these types of data governance, most of that stuff is not even close in terms of what they come up with. Did I give you some sort of an answer there, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear like maybe a specific example if you do have one where you went into an organization and like, I don't know, you set yourself up in there. Is it like I know when in my personal experience when we did IT transformations, we were moving from classic waterfall delivery to so-called agile. We had gurus who came in and they were literally implanted at senior management as well as delivery teams. And we had weekly sessions where basically we were just trained on this new idea and philosophy and refinement and cyclically. Yeah, is that something that would also be the case in data? Yeah.
Must, right? There's no other way to do it. Think about it. You guys are here talking about data, right? How often does this happen on the sidewalk? Not terribly, right? My wife will go, oh my God, the latest update of the iOS, I can't get to my contacts now. That's sort of the extent of the conversation. And by the way, she's pretty tech savvy as far as all that goes. But yeah, we've definitely you have to find out what's working in the organization. What are the levers that you do? And you asked about a specific example. Where I got doged out of was one of the intelligence agencies. So you guys know we're all part of the Five Eyes. right? I'm going to make sure we keep that loop here. In spite of what they say in Washington, we still love you guys and we still love the Canadians, right? It doesn't look like it for some reason. But what has to happen here is I had a 250 person organization in one of these organizations that was just doing financial data preparation, just the books, right? And you're thinking 250 people, oh my gosh, what were they doing? Well, they have to report this way, and they have to report that way, and they have to report that way, and they have to report that way. Very, very confused. And of course, everybody's got their own siloed piles in there. And the hardest thing for this group, Peter, was prying the spreadsheets out of their hand, because they had gotten to like the spreadsheets. It's a good tool. They wanted to use it that way. But we had to say, no, you're going to use shared data. We're going to put it in one central place. You're going to pull from that central place. And we were making progress. In fact, this is actually the business that Doge was supposed to be doing for them. It wasn't what they did. What they did was a big data grab, and they stole everybody's data, not just our data, by the way. They stole all of your data that we had on you guys as well. So again, a mess. It turned out Doge has cost us far more than they ever saved us, as far as that goes. Thank you, Elon, et cetera, et cetera. Daniel, look like you got a question too.
Yeah. It's just with regards to the, I guess, like generative AI stuff and the integration of it into your sort of daily workflows and incorporating it into, getting it to do a lot of this, it does like 70% of the job on some documentation that you have to produce, and then you can kind of tweak it from there. Where I work, I'm working for the government here as well, and there's a lot of kind of stuff that we are not really meant to put into our generative AI. There's a lot of sensitivity around what actually goes into it. So I'm sort of just wondering, is there sort of because obviously implementing and developing your own internal LLM is such a big job that most government agencies aren't going to go down the path of, or at least not in some way where it's actually effective. Is there a risk that some government areas, I guess, won't be able to utilize this and would then be at like a disadvantage, competitive disadvantage in the sort of world of business and efficiency and yeah, I guess that's the question.
Fair one. So one of the things I work in, when I was working on these projects, I worked in a building where you went in and your cell phone stayed out, right? You get the whole picture. Nothing's going, everything is air gapped on the inside. And so what the intelligence community did was that they built their own versions of things. So they are not at ChatGPT 5.0 at this point, but they are getting capabilities that they have managed to put on the high side, as they call it, so that they do have pretty good access to some of these things. I actually got written up recently because I was having the image generator generate things, and I did something that it didn't like and said, "Oh, you've got a little tick against you here because you did something bad," which wouldn't have happened on the outside because they don't have any monitoring that occurs. So once again, clearly they had done some things in there, and I didn't get arrested for doing whatever it was I was doing. I was asking to generate pictures or something. I forget exactly what it was. I think it was a frog in a boiling water, where the temperature goes higher and the frog doesn't notice it. I think that was the image I was trying to do. And that was apparently not too politic to do that. But yes, it very, very much, again, different organizations are going to have different kinds of needs, and you guys are going to be the experts. I'm not going to be, you are the experts. You know more about what's going on from a data perspective than anybody else. And that's going to make a huge difference out there, because you will be looked at as, oh my God, what do we do? And they're going to say, Daniel, what do you think we should do? Right?
Great. Other questions from the class?
No, you are starting to get an accent, I can tell.
It rubs off after a while.
For sure.
Can you hear me?
When I travel around, I can say hello and goodbye in about 20 different languages, like most Americans, but nothing at all beyond that.
Yeah, for Guy, go ahead. Yeah, we can hear you.
You could hear me.
Yeah,
good. I just got this challenge whereby, like, we want to take advantage of AI. Like, I've been working with a bunch of vendors about how we can get digital twins for our lead smelting process and other processes around it. My biggest challenge is actually when it comes to some of those guys who have historically been very smart, right? who use Q sums, analysis of variance, analysis of means, to analyze their data regressions, things that I do and I understand how to do from my Six Sigma and general engineering training, right? But then they're saying, I haven't seen my engineers or metallurgists actually do it, right? So I'm not ready. I don't think they are ready for digital twinning and AI. And I'm saying, look here, dude, they're not doing it, right? Let's just go AI, right? So maybe we can replace them, right? All right, but we need them. Then they say, no, I need them to do it first before I know I need to, if they're mature enough to use AI and digital twins. How do, like, and I'm set there in the middle and value is just getting lost, right? Every single day we're losing value. How do I go out, like this transition? How do I transition these guys into this AI world?
So the best thing to think about was a tagline that one of the big companies in tech put out at the beginning of last year. And it says, everybody is ready for AI except your data, right? And that your job won't be replaced by AI, but you'll be replaced by somebody who knows how to use AI better than you. This is going to put you as a leader in a position of saying, okay, folks, here's the new playing field. We're going to start using these digital twins and things like that, but we're not going to do it to replace what you're doing. We're going to do so that it'll help extend your capabilities. And if you're not using AI, you're going to be an old engineer and you're going to be relying on the old methods. And there's good, but it's not going to work here at this company because we need to move faster than that. So think of it as you're creating these pieces in here, you're creating another set of ways of doing it, just the same way as if we were working in two different languages. We might have a book between us where we were sharing words and trying to figure out, you mean this and you mean this, back in the days before our AirPods did the translation for us, right? So it's really better not to think of this as something that's going to replace people, but something that's going to help certain people become more effective at what they do. And that's really what I've been looking at, is trying to say, how can we as human beings work well with this stuff? And it does seem to be working well. We've got some very, very good numbers that show on this, in spite of the fact that I showed you a slide that said 95% of these projects are not returning a good return on investment. And I think that's because most people aren't approaching the problem from the right perspective. If we look at it as this is going to reduce headcount, yeah, that's not the way to do it. You're going to lose way too much internal expertise. Instead, if you look at it as saying, this is going to help all of my people become much more effective. And instead of being able to handle 100 customers last year, I can now handle 150 or maybe 200. And I'm just putting numbers out. Does that help at all?
Yeah, that's right. It's just how do I communicate that and sort of break through?
The breakthrough part is to try and find your coalition of the willing. So where I do it and around the world, I've got DAMA chapters. I have one in Sydney, I have one in Brisbane, they're all over the world. And these are just people who get together professionally and talk about data. Well, you need the same thing in your companies. You need to have a regular, particularly if you're trying to accelerate this, a weekly meeting to say, what are you guys doing with AI? Oh, wow, that was a really innovative use there. Oh, students love my class because if they don't use AI, they can't pass the class, right? It's just the opposite of, using it to cheat kind of a thing. But you need to do the same thing in your organization. Get people doing this. You'll find you'll have the same traditional curve. You'll have early adopters and you'll have late adopters. And you want to make sure the early adopters are doing this, showing that they're doing things, showing that they're creating these new results. And other people are going, ooh, I really hate writing those reports, whatever those reports are. Well, how did you get AI to write that report? And more importantly, how did you verify that the AI did it correctly? That's where we get into the explainability piece, because we've seen lots of examples of people handing this stuff in and people going, oh, you got AI to generate that and it's hallucinating. So it doesn't work out quite as well as it was supposed to.
Great. Others?
I have another question.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk around ethical use of data beyond pure profit making. From what I've seen, CEOs are primarily focused on profit. And so one of the primary drivers of AI adoption is to remove headcount or to remove humans from the cost of doing business, if you want to express it like that. How does that sit with the moral impetus of using data to help people when we're essentially making them irrelevant. I'm just curious what your thoughts are in that potential next 5 or 10 years, and where it becomes more and more advanced. How are we going to deal with that as a society, I guess?
So think back to the hype cycle that we saw at the very beginning of it, right? We've lived through this. You guys have lived through this. Do you remember when big data was going to solve everything out there? How'd that work out for us? Some people did really well analyzing larger amounts of data through novel ways of going in and doing the analysis work. Again, the idea that we've escaped the von Neumann architecture on these. It's really important. But you're right. People are only going to get the snippets there, and they're going to think, I can get AI, I can replace people. I think most of those efforts are doomed to fail, particularly early on. We may get there later on. We may find out eventually that we can have all sorts of things where a person can be much more productive themselves. But all of this is going to be the case. And I literally, I'm working, I have my screen, and I have a thing opened up here for Chat GPT or Gemini, and I'm doing things on the side and cutting and pasting and going back and forth and using this. And if somebody told me I couldn't use it when I went inside the building, for example, and had to leave my computers and my cell phone outside, I at least had those resources to be able to use that to make it more productive. But if you look at it as we're going to replace people, nah, it's definitely not the right approach. And we've tried to, the other part that you guys all lived through was outsourcing. Remember, we're going to outsource to India. The Indians will be able to do this because they're a whole lot cheaper, right? Well, the Indians turned around and they outsourced back to West Virginia, right? I mean, it was just a complete silly cycle with all of that, and nobody really did anything. Sure, we've gotten better at communicating and collaborating across the world, but we've also discovered that different cultures have challenges meshing, and we can't just simply say, we'll go do it where the cheapest price point is. There's a great book called Apple in China, if you want to read about how this worked out. It's really, really an interesting piece. They did a lot of work and they're analyzing the particulars of how that worked out. Amy, you have a question?
Yeah, it was just Peter's question got me interested. I work in entertainment media, and so there's a huge shift at the moment with just jobs being lost due to AI and idea generation and that kind of thing. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are on, like, there's one thing to have medial tasks and data, like just kind of data entry being AI. But what do you think about the like original ideas being generated by AI and how that do you foresee people becoming just really lazy and just ideas just kind of being cyclical?
Well, I see people becoming really lazy, but that's mainly because most people are not like you all trying to get advanced education, spending your time and energy to learn more about all of these things. But the originality, what I find for me is that I ask the AI a lot of times, what am I leaving out? And it does, in fact, give me good suggestions. I won't swear to you that it's gotten everything I've left out, but it's certainly better than me sitting around myself and trying to get my brain to, tell me what it is I need to have in there. So once again, it's a nice piece. But you said you were laying people off. So what types of positions are being lost?
A lot of writing and concept generation
Because
is
we can
being lost at
hand
the moment.
those
Yeah,
snippets out there. Now, is the product that they're
exactly.
producing, has anybody done a QA on that and seen whether it's producing as good as stuff or not?
Still super early stages. So that's why it's really interesting just to see how it's all coming about.
And I think that's something you're going to have to monitor carefully. We outsourced a lot of things, and we discovered that maybe it wasn't worth. Here's another one that you guys have all lived through: ERPs, right? Everybody knows SAP and PeopleSoft and all these things. Turns out that the average cost to implement them is about $50,000 per worker in some organizations. What sort of productivity increase are you going to get for $50,000 out of a person? I mean, I don't ever see it. I've gone in and done these measurements, and there's just no way they're going to get these projected pieces. Why would you invest something like that? Well, things are a mess and we need to clean them up. That's our first piece. If we can get that part done, then we can really start to try and get the, wow, this is really cool, and we can go from there. And I do it. I have it for this talk, right? I sat down and said, all right, so I've got some ideas about what data governance is, but what are the things that other people think about? And I think of the list I had was maybe 6, and the AI had suggested 2 more. So we had a total of 8 that were there. Once again, I don't know that's the full list, but it certainly was a help in terms of preparing the thing.
Great. Other questions? Michael, Sahan, Gary?
Yeah, I've got a question. Firstly, thanks, Peter, for a terrific presentation. Earlier in your presentation, you touched on incorporating data into decision making, and you mentioned that I think it was something like C-suite personnel lean on about 80% of their gut feel to make key decisions. I'm just wondering, do you think that actually is the case, or do you think that maybe they've got really good techniques of analysing data quickly, perhaps? Just wondering what you've seen in your observation experience.
It's a really good question, Michael. My personal belief on this, I certainly can't talk about it from an empirical perspective, is that most organizations are really trying very, very hard to figure out what's going to give them an advantage. Some of them are like, oh my God, Amazon's doing this, so we need to do this as well, right? Keeping up with the Joneses and that sort of thing. But if we look at what's really happening out there, what we're trying to do is make people smarter and people's interaction smarter. And if that flips and we get to the AGI kind of concepts that some people are really worried about, then we're going to be facing a different set of challenges. And I personally don't believe those are going to be there. There's a great book called The Myth of Artificial Intelligence, and it goes through and describes why the AGI is never actually going to come. Because imagine this, right? You guys, let's pretend we're all together, and I walk into the room and I'm going to give you one more boring lecture before lunch, right? And you guys have had a morning full of boring lectures, and I can walk into the room and see that you guys need some sort of perking up and waking up because you've been PowerPointed to death for the first 3 hours that were in front of you here, right? Well, AI can't figure that out. They can't have that flash of insight. They can't, what's called abductive reasoning. And that's the part I think that we've really got some very good opportunities to be able to help out on, because I don't think we're ever going to get to these set of constructs that are going to be out there. Again, Myth of Artificial Intelligence, the author is Eric Larson. It's a 150-page book, but it's a really, really good book that addresses some of those topics.
Thanks for that. I'll have a read of that book.
Great.
Yeah. Hi, Peter. I got a question. I want to discuss the financial mode of the AI agent for the future. Like, if we in the future, if we do a task, right, we use AI agents. So the AI agent should cooperate with other agents. So and currently here's the new payment protocol in Web3 is called X402. It's used for the AI agent. So which means if I give a task for the AI agent need to fetch the trust data. So normally the AI agent should use the X402 pay. Like if I use my Web3 wallet to approve the AI agent, use the X402, and this AI agent can seamlessly to pay to get any trustless data source. Yeah. Do you think that is the future of the financial mode of the AI agents?
I think there's going to be some challenges. I think there's still some challenges to overcome there, because what you described was an orchestration layer that's going to be going off, and we're going to hand this to things, and this AI is going to talk to this AI, and these things are going to go back and forth. But the problem is you don't know what the motivation of those AIs are. Again, have you guys discovered the GEMS component of Gemini?
Mm-hmm.
So if you go into Gemini, you can actually create little snippets, and you can say, I've got these 3 pieces of information. You drop it in there and it'll automatically write you a letter of recommendation, or lots of other routine tasks that you're doing that are there. I'm sure there's a Copilot equivalent of it in there. But the trust part is the part that's hard, because we have this natural desire to understand what the AI is doing. And in fact, from a business perspective, it's really important. For example, I might say it to a business thing, I've got a set of stock, and when it reaches a certain level, I want to sell it. Well, that's a rule-based piece. There's nothing intelligent about that. But if we've got another piece that says a balanced portfolio should be 60% equities and 40% bonds, right? Then it might do things to try and rebalance that particular portfolio. But if that AI doesn't have the same goal as this other AI that's cooperating with it, that AI may say, oh, no, I don't ever want you to invest in bonds. You should be investing in Bitcoin, right? And having it go off in the other direction. So until we know the characteristics of these AIs, I'm certainly not going to hand it to anybody. For example, I won't even use an AI travel planner because my scheduling is such that I have very, very tight scheduling needs. And part of that is I've got to be there for classes, just like Manoj has to be there for classes, right? So I'm never going to allow an AI to go in and have this type of access to it because it doesn't understand the airline situation. Again, like I said, I'm getting ready to take off for Canada tomorrow, and who knows what the airlines are going to be filled with, but there's no way an AI agent would be able to handle these things until there's a specific piece that says, oh, by the way, Peter, the flight you were going to get on to go to Shanghai has been canceled. And so now you're going to have to go bound the other direction and go to Charles. I'll put an AI on that problem very, very nicely. That's a very narrow bounded project. But just having generalized goals out there, they also have generalized objectives and generalized ways of approaching it. And we need to understand those before we need to learn how to trust them. And I think there's a long way to go before that, because we have not, our computer science community has not decided that having explainable AI is a goal. Of course, we had I don't know if you guys saw this, we had a headline where a Waymo car in San Francisco ran over somebody's cat, right? And it's like, well, it was probably supposed to do that, because if it was a choice of hurting the passenger or hurting the cat, pretty sure the programming says sorry cat, and I've got 5 cats, so I'm not feeling good about the cat being gone on this. But if we don't have that explainability in there, imagine if you got in a car and the car said to you, by the way, you're signing a waiver, we're going to kill some people along the way, but you'll come out safe. I think twice about whether I'm going to jump into that vehicle,
Yeah. All right, unless Sahan has any questions.
Yeah, I guess I do have one. You mentioned earlier that because we don't have enough data to train AI to do certain tasks, what do you think will be the root cause of it? Like, why we don't have enough data sets to train AI in general?
So you guys know how some of the foibles have occurred in our current set of technologies. The people who put together the facial recognition database were largely pale males. And surprise, surprise, the facial recognition systems did a pretty good job of finding, I'm supposed to be pale, I'm actually a pink male is where I come in. But nevertheless, it's still, that case. If we don't have people that are building these unbiased data sets to train the AI, we're going to end up with bias in the AI. And that's just a simple fact. We can look almost anywhere around it, almost any AI, and find sources of bias in it, in there. We've got to have ways of getting rid of these sources of bias at the entry level, and then having them certified and say, look, this will recognize 100% of the faces it ever encounters. Again, in our country, we have a big problem where people think there's a lot more crime than there actually is. So many people are scared of non-existent crime is basically what happens. But the protocol for dealing with somebody who's taken a car, who's stolen a vehicle, is you get the people out of the car, you lay them flat down on their face, you search them for weapons, and it's a complete sort of protocol in there. None of the cops know that license plate readers are only 90% accurate, which means 1 in 10 people that you do that to are going to be completely innocent. There's no concept of this in law enforcement, right? They're just like, it said it's there, though, therefore you're going to, you're the person we're going to take in. It's really a bad situation. I think that's one that's going to have to be done overall by the literacy pieces, that people are going to have to become more literate all the way around in order to get this effectively using it.
All right. I am gonna wrap up with a comment and a question, Peter, because I know it's really getting late for you or early morning for you. My comment is that thank you again for the presentation. I think what it really helped was we had talked about all of these independent topics separately over the last many weeks. But so the way you brought it all together made perfect sense because it tied all the different pieces together into a cohesive message and why that matters. So I think that's my reflection. I feel that would be a fair statement on behalf of everybody.
Thanks.
And my second question is, if you were to see this picture in 1985, and if you knew what you would have known now, how would things have been different for you?
Wow. Well, my investment strategy would have been different. If you guys can't tell, I'm the one with the dark glasses that's in there. And that was about the time we met, wasn't it, Manoj?
Well, probably a decade later.
Wow. Hindsight would be great, wouldn't it? Well, there's certainly so this was literally the staff that ran the VCU Computer Center in 1985. Took that many people to keep one computer up and running. You can imagine how much that has changed. And I think we're very fortunate that we've seen that growth and understanding. I think kids today just assume, they've got their devices in their hands, and this is always going to be there. Oh, you can't see my device. I'm holding it. That's
no,
really
we can't see it.
Yeah,
I think there we go. Yeah.
Oh, I look like a magician. There we go. But not having these devices is really truly leaving people helpless. And again, it's just a very, very sad thing. Delta Airlines, one of the airlines I run on a lot, actually has AI built into their systems at this point. And when I call them, because I fly so much on Delta, it says, yes, Dr. Aiken, we noticed that your flight was canceled and we're working really hard right now to get this. Can we call you back in 10 minutes when we've got your flight? Wow, I don't have to wait in line. I don't have to do it. Now, not everybody gets that, but not everybody does 1 million miles a year on the airline. So it's an interesting piece. Yeah, what would have changed? Boy, that's a really interesting one. I'm so glad somebody found this picture. All of these guys were the ones that trained me on how to do this stuff, so it's good to see them.